Well, good afternoon. We are in a very dangerous spot here.
Thank you.
We are standing between you and a cocktail party. So,
Please.
but we have an outstanding panel. Here's a little bit about what we're going to do. The title of the panel is called Speed Bumps to Success. We're going to focus on both energy and education. And what I find interesting is calling them speed bumps to success. In our view, we're going to talk a little bit today about how we can make both energy and education highways to prosperity and success. Talk about some of the things that the panelists here believe that we can do. As on the previous panel, on your table are index cards. If you have questions as the presenters make their comments, please jot them down, bring them up to me. We'll certainly try and get as many of them introduced here and asked today as we possibly can. What I'm going to do is introduce the panel. I'm going to give them, just introduce their name, title. Their complete bios are in your book. Please read them so you know a little bit more about the folks who have come out here today, and we certainly appreciate that. Many of them have traveled to get here to Central PA. And then they're going to do about 4 to 5 minutes. Then we're going to open up. We're going to have a discussion here and then hopefully take a lot of your questions as well. First, immediately to my left, Erica Clayton-Wright. She's Director of Communications for the Marcellus Shale Coalition. To her left is Darlene Robbins, who's the President, Northeast Pennsylvania Manufacturers and Employers. To Darlene's left is Otto Banks. He's Executive Director of the Reach Alliance. And finally, I'm surprised he said he didn't want to sit to the far left, but I guess he's to your right. I'm to the far left. Tom Smith. I didn't know what to call Tom for a title, but I think he has the best title up here. I called him entrepreneur. So those are our 4 folks today. We'll start and work down from here. So Erica, if you want to do 4 to 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to Darlene.
Thank you, Gene. I think there's a lot of conversation that's happening out there across Pennsylvania and across the country about responsible shale gas development. And I think one of the most important messages that I'll sort of lead off with is responsible shale gas development means jobs and economic security. And I think that's something that's really important as we look to our future and securing our economic future for the next generation of Pennsylvanians and Americans. Well, we have this wonderful, abundant resource just underneath our feet here in Pennsylvania. Clean, affordable, abundant resource right under our feet. It's only really been in the last 10 years that we've explored the Marcellus Shale development. And while we understand what the opportunity is, we're just recognizing we're just on the brink of finding out what that really means. And what we have realized is Pennsylvania alone has recognized more than 240,000 jobs directly tied to the industry. Average salaries around $93,000. You know, all of those get taxed. We make revenue off of those. And more importantly, it has really secured our position in the world from the standpoint that America is now the #1 producer of natural gas, not Saudi Arabia and not Russia. So it gives us a really, and one other thing to add is consumers. Consumers have been realizing a significant savings as a result of natural gas development. So all in all, I think it's really important. Pennsylvania as an industry is at a crossroads as we talk about regulations, taxes on the industry, and we need to really take a step back and realize the opportunity in front of us and really try to work together to get this equation right. And so as we move forward with some questions, I'll be happy to answer those related to upcoming speed bumps and obstacles.
Great, thank you, Erica. Darlene?
Okay. My comments are based upon the disconnect between public education and opportunities available, most notably in the manufacturing sector. The state of Pennsylvania is ranked #4 in the country by manufacturing employment, totaling 563,500 jobs. Just recently, I was part of a group in Northeast PA, and we surveyed 100 manufacturing companies as to their skills gap and the job opportunities available. They listed 195 jobs. Of those, 18 jobs required a 4-year degree, 12 jobs required a 2-year degree, 10 some high school diplomas, some type of certification, but 155 jobs required only a high school diploma. the face of manufacturing has changed due to the structural costs that our manufacturers face on a global basis, competing with their 9 major trading partners, the cost of regulatory, which we were talking about in the hall, cost of taxes, which we've heard about today, excluding labor. Even before the game starts, our trading partners are 20 runs ahead of our US manufacturers. But most importantly, our companies can't compete without the employees to fill the jobs. And the face of manufacturing has changed. It's a lot more brain work, less brawn work, and it looks like computer programming and engineering. You need continuous improvement in education, on-the-job training, but on-the-job education as well. The council that I'm president of, in 2006, we started a program, the YES program, because my board of directors charged me with the issue that I heard for the last 15 years, along with all my economic development partners, employability skills. You got to find something, Darlene, to address this. So we did. And it's a 120-hour, 1-credit elective. It teaches employability skills and a career awareness. But what it did, it created a product for business and education to work together. And they did. Business endorsed it by providing preferential interviews. Educators absolutely endorsed it and helped it to grow. But students were empowered by it. And colleges wanted to provide scholarships for these individuals. Companies are coming into the classroom interviewing them. That everybody was ambassadors for the program. Last year, the House Majority Policy Committee accompanied our Pine Grove High School YES class, as well as the school administrators, and toured Solar Innovations in Pine Grove. This company was nominated the last 3 years for the Governor's Impact Award. And prior to the tour beginning, Solar's CEO, he attends every tour, he asked the students, how many of you knew we were here? And a quarter of them knew that they were located there. And then he asked them, do you have any idea what manufacturing looked like before you came here? And they said no, they never knew that there was something that cool that was made in their backyard. And this is not an anomaly. We hear it all the time. Over 400 of our YES students were surveyed in the 13-14 school year. 80% plan on going to college. 56% of that 80% plan on going for a 4-year degree. The disconnect with our emerging workforce believes you need a 4-year degree to obtain employment, making a family-sustaining wage. Representative Tobash introduced House Bill 1816, which provides Act 48 credits to teachers who tour manufacturing facilities. It allows educators to pass along not only what manufacturing looks like, but what education is needed for those positions, what skill level is needed, and helps that they will be able to help provide more career information on the chosen career the student selects. It's a natural extension of what our council's been doing. Since 2006, we have coordinated over 300 tours in Luzerne and Schuylkill County. We put through over 4,300 students. And I can tell you that I am very excited to work with Representative Tobash, Act 168, in opening up our tours to any teachers in our region who want to firsthand see what manufacturing is. In order for our manufacturers in PA to compete on a national and global level, collaboration between education and the private sector to align educational programs is imperative to yield the skills relevant to the jobs available.
Okay. Thanks, Darlene. Otto?
Oh, thank you. Before I actually go into detail and talk about, there's 4 major points that I feel as though need to be addressed. I'd like to tell you a story that I recently shared with my son. He's in middle school, he's 6th grade, so of course he's going through that whole peer group, peer pressure piece. And I shared this story with him that I just have to share with you because it is germane to this discussion. It's the story, we could say it took place here in Harrisburg area, in the Susquehanna Valley. There was actually, high above in this cliff, there was an eagle's nest that was perched. And right below, in the valley, of course, there were some chickens. Food. He said, I'm already, so there were some chickens. And then one day, there was a storm. The sky became gray. There was a torrential downpour, and all of a sudden you heard a big boom, crack. Next thing you know, the eagle's nest became dislodged, and of course, in that nest, there was one egg. So that egg, of course, then it began to plummet to the earth, down into the valley. And so, like I said before, the chickens were down in the valley, and the chickens saw the egg, and they said, you know, we better go get that egg. So the chickens went and got the egg. One of the mother hens actually, sat on the egg and, of course, gave birth to, of course, which was a little eaglet. As time progressed, this little eaglet, of course, would go around and pretty much essentially do what chickens do because he was with his friends. He was part of the peer group. So he began to take on the personalities of the chicken. So then one day, all of a sudden, this huge form flew across the sky. It blocked out the sun. And lo and behold, it was an eagle. And our little eaglet looked up at this eagle and said, man, one day I want to be able to do that. And then all of his little friends, all of his little chickens start laughing at him and said, man, you'll never be able to do that. Never. And of course, the little eaglet said, why not? He said, because you're a chicken and you do what chickens do. And then you know what happened to the little eaglet? He said, I guess you're right. So as time went on, of course, he maintained the personality of a chicken and, of course, eventually died. The moral of the story is this, ladies and gentlemen. You'll never, ever, ever be able to soar with the eagles if you keep on hanging around a bunch of chickens. In Pennsylvania, we need to stop hanging around a bunch of chickens.
That's a good one.
Because there are some tough policy issues that need our immediate attention. And the first and foremost, of course, is pension reform. And some of you might say, well, what does pension reform have to do with education? Quite simple. These pensions are bankrupting many of these school districts. There's like $52 billion that must be addressed in order to at least stabilize and address the pension issue. Instead of putting that money in those pensions, it could go back into the classroom. It can go back into buying additional support. You can use the money to hire additional teachers. So pension reform is definitely at the forefront. The second one, of course, is the funding formula. We have to make sure that the resources are distributed equitably to ensure that the districts that need the most amount of support and resources receive what they want. But on top of that, we also got to make sure we get an ROI. Mm-hmm. And the way we do that is because of what Act 82, which is teacher evaluation. Because what have we been doing? We've been giving money, but we haven't been demanding a return on an investment in education. So we have to, of course, look at Act 82 again. And that's the act, ladies and gentlemen, that looks at teacher evaluation and principal evaluation, but we need to expand it, maybe look at superintendents, because they're the ones that manage and control the school districts. So we have to look at the superintendents as well. And then, of course, unfunded, the mandates. There are a lot of burdensome mandates that are placed on districts that also have an adverse impact. And one of them that we can talk about right now, which is germane to all these industries, of course, is when it comes to prevailing wage. Right? Look at the prevailing wage in Davis-Bacon. You know, it's more expensive to build a school than it is to build probably this hotel because there are laws that are put in place that kind of prevent the types of development that we need to save money in these districts. So those are the main issues that I think are speed bumps to strengthening our education system. Now, of course, I can narrow down and we can talk more, but again, I want you to really think about pension reform, mandates, teacher evaluation, and of course, funding formula. Those are the main 4 issues. And I tell you what, we have some champions on the Hill right now with Representative Saylor And then, of course, we have Representative Mike Verb, of course, that they're looking at the funding formula issue. And I'm telling you, I would respectfully request that each and every one of you place the calls to your reps and say, you know what, these issues need to be addressed, they need to be done, and they need to be done now, because we're tired of hanging around a bunch of chickens. It's time for us to get on the floor like eagles.
Thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Gene. This topic was speed bumps to success. Of course, one would have to define success. But I decided God has blessed me many, many times. I've started my own businesses from scratch. And I can relate to you folks. Just the feeling I had was when I was young and full of vinegar of starting my own businesses. It's a feeling that I can't put into words. But there are a lot of speed bumps if you start your own business. Regulatory, of course, is one of them. And I made the mistake of choosing one that I think is probably one of the most regulated there is in Pennsylvania, and that is coal mining. I mean, you had to deal with all these regulatory requirements. You had to deal with the regulatory people. And like any group, they're all unique unto themselves. But the word redundancy, I really think the federal and the state and local governments need to look up the word redundancy. Because in my industry, we were inspected by the state, inspected by the feds, to a degree that I bet a lot of people don't truly fathom. I bought this mine one day, and I decided to make a change. I was always trying to figure out, how can we do this safer? How can we do this more economically? And I know you're going to think less of me, but I was always trying to figure out, how can the company make more money so we can give our employees benefits, more benefits? So I decided to make this change, and after 3 months, I had to change it back. I only ran one shift. This is an underground coal mine, and I wanted to cut out possibility one guy. And after 3 months, it became obvious to me, but because of the regulations, I had to go to 2 shifts, because after 1 quarter, we had more inspector shifts than we had production shifts. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You know, they declared a war on coal. I was in a company or in a business where I loved it. It was a needed commodity. I did meet a lot of people. You have no idea when you start your own business just how many people you're going to meet, like inspectors, like lawyers, like accountants. I mean, the list goes on and on. That was one of my biggest expenses, was dealing with these regulatory people. And never forget, politicians pass laws, but it's the bureaucrats that tell us what is in there and what they say. And you will see as they change and morph over time. Today, in this great country of ours, the estimate from Ford magazine is that for people and businesses to comply with all government regulations, it comes at a cost of over $2 trillion annually. And growing. The fact of the matter is, the Federal Registry, I think their printing press is working faster than the ones that print the money. But it goes on, and it's making it harder and harder for entrepreneurs to start a business. And let's really look at things. Most people starting businesses today don't have some innovation they come up with. Some do. But most of them are people that they're taking an existing system, an existing industry, and they have to do it better. They have to do it more economical to survive. Now, the war on coal, and I'm from Western Pennsylvania where coal was king. I am here to tell you today the war on coal for small and medium-sized producers is over. It's lost. and that should not be. But as we move down the road, I find that the state government is not doing as much as they can to help their own state companies. In fact, in many cases, they're one of the biggest problems. But again, I do not want to impede anybody from living their dream of starting their own business. I can tell you without no reservations whatsoever, the amount of battles we fought, I loved every minute of it. And I would recommend it to anybody.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Once again, if you have questions for any of the panelists, please jot them down, bring them up here, lay them over, make an airplane, throw them at me, whatever you want to do here. Erica, a couple questions for you. You would think that most people would embrace the fact that we're now here in America and in Pennsylvania producing energy. We're on our way towards being energy secure, yet there still remains some significant opposition to the industry. And what we hear tossed around very casually from time to time are things like, the industry doesn't pay any taxes.
Sure.
Or, well, you know what, the gas is here, they have to stay here.
Sure.
What's wrong with those statements?
They're very misleading. I think, Pennsylvania has a very unique environment, business environment. I think we all know our tax structure is very complex. And so, I think one of the taglines you often hear is about our severance tax. We're the only state that drills gas that does not have a severance tax. But what we have is an impact tax. And the reason we have that impact tax is because it fits with our burdensome corporate tax structure that we currently have. And so, when we hear the rhetoric about that it will generate revenue, what we have to make sure that people realize is that Pennsylvania natural gas drillers already pay their fair share. We've already generated more than $2.3 billion. We pay taxes just like every other industry, generating almost $2.3 billion in tax revenue since 2008. We have actually taken revenue options off the table recently with the moratorium on drilling in state parks. We actually had $700 million, which would help actually close the education gap that you talk about, the billion-dollar myth. $700 million is a pretty significant chunk of change that could go towards that revenue towards education. The educational shortfall. And then in addition to that, I think the most important thing that's really unique about the impact tax is that it doesn't come back to Harrisburg and get redistributed. It's distributed to the 67 counties across the Commonwealth for them to decide how it gets paid. And so when we look, we want to lead, we don't want to follow, we want to lead. And we have an opportunity to get this equation right. And so when we look at the impact tax is a very competitive way for us to manage and take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us in a very responsible way. And so we want to continue to see the impact tax stay in place because it does benefit all 67 counties. It benefits all Pennsylvanians. And so that is the structure that we need to keep in place.
Great, thank you. Darlene, people have this idea of manufacturing. Tell us a little bit about what a manufacturing facility looks like in 2015 and how the industry is changing, for example, incorporating 3D technology, the 3D printing side.
Well, in order to compete and to advance their technological processes, robotics, a manufacturing firm in 2015 looks like computer programming and engineering, much different than it had before. If the companies aren't able to hire the individuals with the STEM skills or with the high-level technical skills that are needed, then absolutely they're going to look at processes that can replace. That's why the future is actually a smaller workforce, labor force than it is today.
Okay, thank you. Otto, question from the audience. You talked about pension reform. Certainly from the Chamber's perspective, it's the #1 issue. You and I agree. Question is, we had a Republican governor, Republican House and Senate, and no pension reform. Why not?
We were dealing with chickens. There have been a lot of changes that have taken place in the Hill. We all know that. We have there are supermajorities in the House and supermajorities in the Senate. You have new leadership who is committed to accomplishing this goal. You know, Senator Corbett, Jay Corbett and I spoke not too long ago. He made it perfectly clear. Nothing's moving until pension reform is the discussion that takes place. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of people in Harrisburg throughout the summer months. And I'm sure that with his leadership, as well as the leadership of Mike Turzai and others, I think we'll have something to work with moving forward. So, to answer the question, of course, they were chicken, and now it's time for the Eagles to fly.
Okay.
Tom, you talked a little bit about the war on coal. I think clearly you believe it's happening, still going on. One of the other things you and I have talked about before is this tendency to pick winners and losers, and one of them is actually a question from the audience about subsidization of green energy, and the governor's proposal and the new administration here would continue some of that. Talk a little bit about your view of that picking winners and losers and subsidizing the green energy side.
I'd be happy to, Gene. First thing, though, I'd like to mention, I don't think our state government is standing up to the federal government as much as they could. And there's many... If I knew that was going to get an applause, I'd have said it better. But no, just an example of that, the last deep mine permit I was working on, we had spent 3 years and $500,000. And we were no closer to that permit than the day we started. And the whole reasoning was the DEP was so afraid of EPA stepping in over them. And let's call it the way it is. When you're at the feed trough of the federal government, it's hard to say no at times. But on the second part of that, yes, I don't think the state government is standing up as well as they should for the people and businesses in the state of Pennsylvania. But sometimes they do some of the strangest things. How many people in this group know what the alternative energy portfolio standard is? You can't see a thing up here, so I assume just about every hand is up. But no, the state of Pennsylvania, and here, I don't think there's anybody on this panel that is against renewable energies. I know I'm not. None of us are. As long as they stand on their own 2 feet. Amen. Yeah. Now, I don't want to ruin your supper, but I'm going to anyhow. The alternative energy portfolio standard is basically this. In 2004, the state of Pennsylvania, and the governor signed it, mandated, not asked, mandated, that starting in 2005, we will use so much renewable energy. It's mandated. Up to 2021. Now, 2021, as you know, is not very far away. But by 2021, 18% of the electricity generated and sold, and I might add, bought by you folks that's really paying for all this, has to come from renewable energy irregardless of the cost. Is that believable? It rendered the Marcellus gas, which is, we should almost get down on our knees and thank the good Lord that we know where our children's energy is, where their children is, and theirs to boot. But the state government has mandated that they cannot use natural gas or coal for 18% of the electricity we use by 2021. I'm with you on pensions, and let's get the alternative energy portfolio turned over. Gene, give me 30 seconds more.
Go ahead.
Because there is some good things. You know, hope is a wonderful thing. And hope is always the last thing to leave. But there's a lot of good things going on, I believe. The state of West Virginia, just for the first time, has a Republican House and Senate in 87 years. And they overturned their alternative energy portfolio standard.
Wow.
Erica, let's follow up a little bit on where the industry's going, growth in industry, what else we need to do to continue to move this forward. Question from the audience: the growth of the industry to a large degree depends upon converting many options. It would be transportation and combined heat power, et cetera, to natural gas. How's that conversion going? What obstacles do you see standing in the way? And I would ask, as part of that, if you'd address the kind of the whole infrastructure issue, if you would.
Sure. So,
in 20 seconds, how's that sound?
Sure, it's okay. I think in 20 seconds, what I can say is, what we're seeing is an abundance of natural gas in the market right now, which is why we're seeing, the price eroding the way that we are. But the other piece in market conditions is part of that. But the other major factor in this is we don't necessarily have the infrastructure and pipeline structure in place to get the gas to market. So when we look at the build out for the next several years, I think there's two major issues confronting our industry, which I've addressed as a severance tax, but the other is effective regulations and pipeline infrastructure build out. So we're keeping a very close eye on both of those items. And like I said, the key for us is over the next 5 to 7 years is really building that pipeline infrastructure so we can take advantage of this generational opportunity.
Okay, great. Darlene, are you hearing from your members, certainly it seems to be a common theme that we hear, that you just can't find the people you need to fill the jobs you have? And how do we make the changes that we need to do to make sure that we have the workforce necessary for the next 5, 10, 15, and 20 years?
Educating educators and educating parents. Yes. I believe that parents still feel that those not in manufacturing feel that manufacturing, is as it was 30, 40 years ago. So educating them, I mentioned my program, there's many more programs. PFEW's here today. The Chamber has various workforce development programs. But it's business and education working together. And I've been in the manufacturing business since '85. And I can tell you, we did assembly programs, did manufacturing day, where we took manufacturers in school, cafeterias and auditoriums, and they shared, an overview of what they manufactured, the product, the skill level needed, the average salary for those positions. In the average manufacturing salary and benefits is close to $69,000. These are pretty high family sustaining wages when you look at the full package. Manufacturing will progress. It's always been the engine of the economy and remains that way. And whether we have the skill level, which of course we hope we do with programs and parents becoming more involved with the schools and companies, of course, opening their doors, whether it's having employee safety days. I mean, there's so many different kinds of initiatives and workforce development to really educate the family unit. But I believe this new Act 168, we solely rely on our teachers and guidance counselors to educate our children as to the types of careers available. But if they don't know, by a county basis or regional, the type of careers that exist in their neighborhood and community, then they're certainly not able to provide the correct information. So I'm hoping that because it does provide Act 48 credits, I'm really hoping that this act is going to forge a stronger bond between education and the manufacturing and business community.
Okay, good, thank you. Otto, you touched on this in your comments. Are we getting a good return on our investment now, and how do we make education work for all of Pennsylvania's kids?
In some respects, absolutely, we are getting a good return on our investment. People often think when they hear the term school choice that we completely want to eliminate the public education system. That is not true. There are good public schools and there are not so good public schools. Same thing exists within the parochial school market as well. We just firmly believe that all children should have access to a quality education and that their zip code and or socioeconomic stratification should not determine the level or quality of their education. Amen. So in some respects, we are getting that return. And I can just give you an example close to us. It's like a tale of two cities. You look at Hershey Public School District and the Harrisburg Public School District. In terms of night and day, per pupil expenditure for Harrisburg Public School District children is $17,000 per child. You can send the same child to Bishop McDevitt for roughly $7,000. Bishop McDevitt has like a 98% graduation rate. Out of those children, most of them go on to post-secondary education. So when you look at the amount that's being spent and what we're actually getting, it's something that I think, of course, this administration as well as both chambers are going to have to look at closely, and I know they are. And of course, we're all aware that the Governor Wolf has proposed that he wants to increase public ed spending by $1 billion. Well, you know, I just hope it's spent wisely, because we're already spending $27 billion. And there's still a lot of question as to whether or not we are getting a return on our investment. So I would hope again that, and of course this touches on the industry as well, I would hope that they would look into pre-K. That's a huge issue. Because what I'm hearing, even from the university level, is that they're spending the first 2 years in college having to remediate so the children are prepared just to do college level work. So that they have to, again, teach them high school work, preparing for college. So then high schools are having to go back and teach middle school, and so forth and so on. So in my mind, I think it's important that we really invest and look closely at investing in pre-K. And one of the issues that my organization, Reach Foundation Reach Alliance, is looking at is to, again, look for an increase in the Education Improvement Tax Credit Program, where corporations can contribute up to $750,000 annually and receive up to a 90% deduction against their state tax liability. The program has been around since 2001, is doing great, and we'd like to see that expanded. And with that expansion, of course, it'll provide more resources for children to be able to attend, pre-K schools as well. So.
Okay, good, thanks.
Yep.
Tom, you touched on something that's, I shouldn't say near and dear to people's hearts, because it's not, but it certainly is heard about a lot, which is the red tape issue. How do we get into the situation that we are, where we have this plethora of laws, hate to single out anything, but energy and environment certainly, and then how did we take those laws and with the regs attached to them, and how do we get ourselves out of this?
How do we get out of all these regulations? Gene, I don't have the first clue.
Okay, well, we'll go on to another question.
I was like, I'm glad
then.
I don't have to answer that question. Tough one.
No, but one of the things that gets us into these predicaments is our compassion. The American people are compassionate. Some people won't agree with this analogy, but who all in this room remembers Enron several years ago? Okay, Enron. Some of the leaders in Enron broke the law. They should go to jail. Eventually they did. Okay, there was two huge nationally known accounting firms that allowed that to happen. Over time, their businesses were all but ruined. And the SEC was very, very derelict in that. But before all the existing laws ran their course and people went to jail and was fined, our federal government does what government does. They worked on emotion. Now, I'm a firm believer that 90% of the businesses and people in this country will do it the right way, maybe even 95. Number one, it's the moral and right thing to do. And number two, they don't want to go to jail. So when Enron happened, our legislators in Congress, what they did was put a layer and another layer and another layer on the 95% that was doing it right. And that's true in any industry. I've seen that in the mining company. I've seen that in our transportation, the trucking company. They penalize with new regulations the people that's already doing it right. And most of the people that had done it wrong would have been if given time, but we react. Law should not and regulation should not be passed with emotion. And there's some things that How do we get rid of them? I don't know. I can give you a whole list, and I'll bet these folks here could too, a whole list of politicians that have said, we need to cut red tape. Well, they must have started on the yellow tape, because I haven't seen any red tape leave yet. But I think what we need to do is to be persistent about that, demand that. You know, when you stop and think about that, $2 billion to comply annually, somewhere along the line, we lost common sense. And it's time to get it back.
Okay, thank you. Erica, there's some other interesting rhetoric that I hear from time to time, and it's interesting that it juxtaposes with the minimum wage. Many of the people calling for a higher mandated government wage are also, interesting, some of the same people who oppose directly or indirectly the natural gas industry, and you talked about the jobs that are there. I mean, I find it a very interesting contradiction there. And the other thing that we hear is, oh, none of those jobs are going to people in Pennsylvania. Can you address both of those a little bit more about what those wages are and who's getting those jobs?
Well, I think I addressed it a little bit earlier in my opening comments. You know, this, as I mentioned earlier, and I think I can't explain this more, it's about jobs, economic security, and consumer savings. But most importantly, what does that mean? And that means if we create more jobs, we'll have more incomes. And the incomes that we're creating are highly technical positions that are well paid for. The average salary in the natural gas industry is about $93,000. That is well above the average. And on top of that, that gets taxed. So if we allow natural economics to occur, we're going to benefit far greater from the benefits of the taxation from the growth of the industry than we would be by taxing the industry. And to get back to your point about the jobs that are fleeing, maybe early on, there were lots of people here from Texas and Oklahoma kind of helping us to set the stage, but many of those folks have gone back to Texas and Oklahoma, and those jobs are now occupied by Pennsylvanians, and we need to continue that job growth. And I think leading into the manufacturing, we're seeing a manufacturing renaissance as a result of affordable energy. And across the country, if we, again, get this equation right, we have the opportunity to create more than 1 million manufacturing jobs. Right here in Pennsylvania, Marcus Hook in Philadelphia, we're seeing Sunoco Logistics investing significant amounts, taking a place that was almost vanished back to a very vibrant, job-creating, economic-creating environment. If we get the infrastructure in place to get the gas to market, we have a really solid future ahead of us.
Okay, thank you. Let me throw this out. We only have just over a minute. Whoever wants to jump on this question, I think I know a couple of you, certainly at a minimum, would be interested. The conversation of making Pennsylvania, speaking of speed bumps, making Pennsylvania a right-to-work state, along with the fact that taxpayers continue to collect union dues and political money. Is that a speed bump to success, and what do we do about it?
Gene, that's maybe more than a steep bump. It's almost a wall. So yes, can you imagine if Pennsylvania become a right-to-work state? No, think. With the gas we have, the energy we have, the rivers we have, the infrastructure we have, the ports we have, Pennsylvania could be fast become the industrial powerhouse that it once was. That's
okay.
For the last 8 years, we have 2 legislative roundtables for the membership, and they determine the topics that our legislators will address. And for the last 8 years, right to work has been on the agenda.
Yes. Okay. That's perhaps a perfect close. We literally have a handful of seconds left. Please thank the panel today for coming out and presenting. Thank you.